A real phone call for help made by a child in the middle of a combat zone, and the dramatized reactions of her would-be rescuers combine to tell a story of the horror, trauma, and ultimate futility of aid workers trying to save the civilian victims of genocide.
The movie is called The Voice of Hind Rajab. This podcast is called All Those Moments. I'm Benji Wade.
And I'm Luke Baumgarten.
All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain.
All Those Moments is a podcast where we connect social, political, or cultural moments with moments from our favorite movies. If you like spoiler-filled, detailed conversations about movies, you have come to the right place, and you should think about hitting that subscribe button, especially if you've been here before.
Yeah.
Luke, I often will start these episodes of All Those Moments by saying, is this one of our favorite movies? Instead, I just want to get right into the topic of this movie. This is by far going to be one of the hardest topics to talk about, the hardest subjects in terms of the movie that we're talking about. So
Simple film, simple structurally. Yeah, difficult to talk about the themes.
Incredibly difficult. I have now seen it twice. The movie is called The Voice of Hind Rajab, and it is a 2025 docudrama directed by a Tunisian filmmaker named Kaouther Ben Hania. It is the story of a 6-year-old girl trapped in a car that has been hit by gunfire during the invasion of Gaza by the Israeli Defense Forces in January of 2024, which means that it was a couple months, if that, into the conflict in Gaza, the most recent conflict of which everybody who's listening to this, we hope, is aware is happening. The girl makes an emergency call to an organization called the Red Crescent Volunteers, pleading for her rescue. While trying to keep her on the line, they do everything they can to get an ambulance to her. Her name was Hind Rajab. Rajab stays on the phone with emergency dispatchers for hours as they struggle to reach her through active combat. While trying to keep her on the line, they do everything they can to get an ambulance to her. The movie uses 70 minutes of real-life phone calls that were made by the real little girl named Hind Rajab while she was trapped in this car. But it has a cast of actors portraying the Red Crescent Volunteers who took part in the real-life events depicted in the movie. It features the following actors: Motaz Malhis as Omar, Saja Kilani as Rana, Amer Chlechel as Madi, and Clara Khoury as Nisreen. I'm sure I have butchered every one of those pronunciations. But
Can you pronounce Madi's name again? The actor's name?
Amer Chlechel.
That was pretty good.
I looked it up.
The gutturals. I mean, it's better than I'm going to do.
What I saw was that it has like a Germanic chl. So I was like, I think I can probably go for that. The movie has similarities to another film that was made by Kaouther Ben Hania called Four Daughters, which came out in 2023. It was nominated for an Oscar that year. Also a docudrama. It is about a Tunisian mother of 4 whose 2 eldest daughters are radicalized by ISIS and they leave their family.
Oh, I think I heard about this movie. I never watched it. But.
Uses a similar conceit to The Voice of Hind Rajab, which I mentioned at the outset of this, that uses 70 minutes of actual recordings of the phone calls of Hind Rajab, right? That's what the movie Voice of Hind Rajab is structured around. Four Daughters is a story about a mother and her 4 daughters in Tunisia. The eldest 2 are radicalized online. They leave to Libya to join ISIS. Ben Hania hires 2 professional actors to portray the eldest daughters in a retelling of the events of what happened to their family, alongside the mother, the actual mother, and her 2 youngest daughters.
Oh, wow.
So in both examples, it's kind of this therapeutic, cathartic way of like framing these incredibly harrowing stories. I saw the trailer to it and I was like, oh boy, this is another buckle up movie, but I really want to see it. Might as well say now that The Voice of Hind Rajab was nominated for Best Foreign Film for the upcoming 2026 Oscars. Yeah. In the same category, I think, as Four Daughters. The movie that we just covered, No Other Choice, was picked up and distributed by Neon.
Right.
Neon would have run the field with all 5 foreign film nominations for 2026 Oscars, except The Voice of Hind Rajab got in over No Other Choice.
Yeah, interesting.
Which is super, super fascinating. Maybe we'll come back to that at the end. But I want to give like not a spoiler warning, Luke, but a kind of trauma warning.
Yeah.
Only because I don't judge what other people choose to do with their time in any aspect of life, including what movies they decide to watch. And this is a very, very difficult watch. Goes without saying, I think. You heard me describe the log line.
I'm not trying to make light of the situation, Benji, but I think you do mock people's choices frequently in private.
Yeah, I might privately judge you if you're not willing to watch this. But in truth, there are things in this movie that if you are a sensitive person, especially if you've experienced anything that even approaches the subject matter, I could completely understand why this would be a very difficult thing to watch.
Yep.
So that said, we are going to go into the story of what happened to the 6-year-old girl.
Yep.
We're going to go into the details of this movie, plot specifics, etc. You and I did not watch this movie together. This was a unique experience for this podcast where we typically watch the movies together because you just watched the movie.
Yeah.
I watched it on Valentine's Day with my wife, Ray.
It's a choice. It's a choice.
Hey, afterward, I think my wife, who's so wise, described this movie in some ways as a meditation on love, and we'll come back to that. You said something like, I don't know how I'm going to talk about this. And I think you were alluding to just trying to separate in some way the real life story of what happened to this 6-year-old girl, Hind Rajab, as well as like the storytelling, the filmmaking, the way that this was produced, etc. We also want to be really honest with anyone listening to this or viewing this on YouTube or Spotify that this is the morning after 11 o'clock last night when I was going to bed. It was announced and I saw the news come across my timeline that Israel and the United States had combined to attack Iran. So the timing of us doing this podcast, if the subject matter of the Voice of Hind Rajab wasn't difficult enough, we're also sitting here as these two rogue states, is how I'm going to describe Israel and the United States right now, are just going to war with fucking anybody with impunity. I just want to say right now, part of the way I would like to honor Hind Rajab and this movie is by not getting too distracted by geopolitics and focusing on the story that's told and depicted in intimate detail in this movie. So
I think that's a good way to start. I think when we're talking about what's the legacy of this film, I do think we're going to have to talk about that a little bit, because we should also say just briefly, we think 80 plus school kids died in part of this bombing. So This is a story about one school-age child dying, and we are living in real time through an entire school.
A girls' school, by the way. School. Yeah.
And probably Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei.
Yep.
So
it was being confirmed as we were walking in here.
So as far as we know, the Israeli government has said Khamenei is dead.
Yeah.
So that's just got me thinking even more about the nature of art in 2026 and what power it actually has.
Yeah. The real life events that are depicted in this story are beyond horrific. As early as like the first month of conflict in Gaza, before it was quite obviously a genocide by most definitions, there were war crimes being committed by Israel. Yeah. And I think one of the reasons we are going to go over the details of the story, and I want to do this in intimate detail, is because that is exactly what hasn't happened with the conflict in Gaza, which now is being correctly described as a genocide. Most of it is viewed from the greatest possible distance, social media. I think we mentioned together on the Eddington episode that we're all living through this kind of Milgram experiment, which is reflected in our attitudes towards social media. You see something disturbing, you just swipe away. You don't actually have to engage in any of the things that are being done with our taxpayer money as Americans, right? So everything's depicted at the greatest possible distance, both emotionally and physically. And this is a podcast where we talk about movies and whether or not they're successful to us artistically. We mentioned that there will be no kid gloves treatments to certain aspects of the production. It is not a perfectly well-made movie. It has flaws, but it also has, for every flaw, it has several things that I think are really beautiful about it. It's an incredibly provocative way of telling a story of what happened to Hind Rajab. And I want to save some thoughts about the movie, its producers, the reception of it for the end of the podcast. So unless you have anything else you want to add,
I think we should just dive in.
Let's take a quick break, and we come back. We're going to dive into all the moments from this movie. The story begins in the headquarters of, Luke was talking about this group called the Red Crescent Society, kind of the equivalent of Red Cross, even though the Red Cross is an international organization, which does come up in this movie as well. You see a group of volunteers. They're at a call center in Ramallah, which is in the West Bank, about 10 miles from Jerusalem, about 50 miles from Gaza. The events of the movie take place in the southern part of Gaza City. Dispatchers at the Red Crescent are on a call. We later find out is Hind Rajab's 15-year-old cousin. She's inside of a car that's in the restricted zone within Gaza City, about a quarter mile from their home. Her family's trying to evacuate, but it feels like I didn't read this, and I kind of interpreted just reading between the lines that they just got caught a little bit late to trying to evacuate.
That's what it seems like. Yeah.
Yeah. You hear gunfire. There's a 15-year-old girl. She starts screaming, and then the call drops. So she's talking to Omar. This is the first like really important phone call that's depicted in the movie. And I just want to say right now, that is, having watched this twice, yes, I watched this movie twice. That was one of the hardest things I've ever seen or listened to, right? I'm watching this moment depicted and I'm listening to this audio, and it is really, really excruciating.
Yeah.
And it's also the first time you see Omar, who's portrayed by Motaz Malhis as the actor, and he repeatedly calls out, hello, hello, hello. His eyes start to well up. The line is silent. And this is how we experience like the events throughout the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
These real life recordings of the voice of the 6-year-old girl, Hind Rajab, and her interactions with these actors that are the dispatchers at Red Crescent. The camera hangs for a really long time on Omar.
Yeah.
And I think it's the first time where you really get to go, does this work?
Yeah.
And my feeling, I'm curious what yours was, Luke, was not only is this worthwhile for this movie to be made, and it's an incredibly important thing to make a movie like this, but I felt very affected by it too.
Yeah.
Because I felt this kind of contiguousness between the actor playing the part of this real life person and the person that they're playing, that they get to basically be in that space.
There are times when Ben Hania makes these choices to sort of break the fourth wall, or there are times when the actors who are playing the characters are sitting silent while the audio from the actual people who experienced it play just for brief moments. And it's unclear at first, actually, if that's just a stylistic choice. There's a moment later on where Rana is like listening back to the recording, but you could tell it's not the voice of the actress. It's maybe the original voice of the real life Rana.
This is one of the most brilliant things about the movie to me.
Yeah.
I had no problem having seen it twice. There's only one, I think, moment I didn't catch, and I'm curious if you caught it, the second time viewing it, of when it goes from being the real life person to the recording of that real life person that they're portraying. Because what you're describing is like Rana's voice will then intersect in the edit or cross-cut with the real voice of Rana. And as a viewer,
his voice,
the actor and the real life person. And I didn't have a hard time distinguishing between the two. And I thought that was a brilliant piece of editing.
Yeah. And then Rana, the actress, I think, like the real life Omar and the actor Motaz does a great job. He's a really, really skilled actor, but his voice doesn't sound that much like the real Omar. I thought the Rana actress
more so
sounded pretty similar. Yeah.
Omar and the other volunteers at this point, they don't know the name of Hind Rajab's cousin, but I want to say it now. Her name was Leon. So Omar calls back. A small, frightened voice answers. Hanud Rajab is her name, Hind for short. And her first words are, "Stay with me. There's no time. There's no one with me." He's joined by his supervisor, Rana. And then they both end up on the call with Hind. Another volunteer coordinator whose name is Mahdi. His job is to gather information about whether or not they should attempt to make the rescue.
So Omar, I think, is like a call center worker. Rana is his supervisor.
Right.
Mahdi is like the dispatcher who's supposed to be the one wherever this is happening in Gaza, who's helping find the ambulance. We'll talk more about the coordination between the various governments and non-governmental organizations that we're going through.
Yeah, and this relationship, I think, is established from the jump as quite tense between Omar and Mahdi. There's a moment where Omar is friends with one of the EMTs that's on the ground in Gaza City, whose name is Yusuf. And he's like, I'm just going to call him. This is probably as good a time as any to say the kind of role, which I'm glad that you surfaced this, that Omar, whether or not he was like this in real life, he does serve a kind of narrative function, but almost kind of like that, the doofus.
He's the eyes of the audience. I think.
Yeah, he ends up being kind of the doofus who can just be like, I'm new here. I don't understand. Why is this way?
Yeah.
I'm sure it wasn't like this in real life. Mahdi is presented as like this ultimate bureaucrat rules follower. Everything has to be done by the book in coordination with these intergovernmental agencies, as well as, we can squint a little bit, the army The word army is used, and every time it's used, it's meant to represent the Israeli Defense Force. Okay, so to get back to the story, Rana and Omar call back Hind. They are confused about who's in the car with her. Hind is confused. She's scared. She's clearly in shock. She says she's next to her cousin Sarah, who's covered in blood, and she describes her as sleeping. Yeah. We can hear gunfire and tank movement near her.
Yep.
And she describes that she can see a tank at this point. And we later learn that everyone in the car with Hind is dead.
6 people.
6 people. Her aunt, her uncle, her 4 cousins who are aged 9, 11, 13, and 15.
Oof.
The idea that they were scrambling to get out of Gaza City, the fact that there were 7 people in this vehicle speaks to that. This vehicle, I'll come back to at the end. I'll just tell you right now, not intended for 7 passengers. For the first time, we hear audio of the real life Rana, and she says, "You're the only one who's awake. No one else is moving, covered in blood." Hind shouts back, "Yes, they're covered in blood. Please help me. I'm all alone." The full weight of what's happening in this story drops not just on the dispatchers at this point. It's both the actors who are portraying them and the voices of the real people and the audience. I think it's at that point that I'm already starting to kind of feel a little dead inside, just at the anger and the sadness and the anguish and how excruciating this is. But I'm like, I'm hanging. It's minute 15 maybe of the movie at this point. Hind stops saying, at this point, a few minutes later, she stops saying that they're asleep. It's almost like she's convincing herself as a 6-year-old would that they're sleeping.
Yeah.
And at this point, she shouts, "I said they're dead. They're all dead. They're only dead bodies. It's my whole family."
احكي مع الشباب، شو مشكلتك انك تحكي مع الشباب؟ شو بصير يعني؟ احكي معهم كلهم طلعوا من 8 دقائق رح ياخذهم مشان يطلعوها للبنت.
8 دقائق مو متكلفون حياتهم اذا ما عملناش التنسيق وعماره.
They're asking for details about who's in the car with you, the family. And I'm like, why are they just trying to keep her distracted? Oh, they're also trying to likely identify. And again, as we know, we don't know how many of these bodies that, are plowed under the rubble in Gaza have even been retrieved. So they're also sort of trying to, at the same time, they're trying to save this child. They're also trying to catalog the dead.
And we also learn later that they're trying to build their case to the Ministry of Health, to International Red Cross, to the IDF, that there's a worthwhile rescue that needs to be attempted.
And then eventually, public opinion, because they start posting on social media. They kind of already know her broad location. They're trying to just confirm that. They're identifying, or they're asking, where's the ambulance at right now? Which is it at the Baptist hospital or this other hospital? They attempt to secure clearance through military channels, through the Red Cross and then through military channels to allow rescue crews to these areas. The tension builds not through action, but kind of through the lack of it, the bureaucratic delay, fragmented information. Mahdi becomes Omar's whipping boy for the bureaucratic red tape up the channel. And also we kind of need to say that at the very end of this chain is the Israeli Defense Forces, who did not seem particularly concerned about preserving human life. So they're fighting an uphill battle no matter what. And Omar, sort of from his limited view, has nobody to yell at except Mahdi.
The round trips he keeps making into the office, I will say, having watched this twice, I wish they had done something else to mix up this part of the storytelling.
Yeah.
I think it took me out just a little bit to just be like, he's going back in there. He's wringing his hands. He's slamming his, fist or whatever. He's shouting. He's doing the marker on the window. Mahdi finally pulls Omar aside and reminds him of the stakes if they don't go through all these bureaucratic leaps.
Yeah.
That there's a wall of Red Crescent humanitarian work martyrs. It literally says that.
Yeah.
And it's photos of people. And he goes through them one at a time and says, yeah, you see her, 4 children. This guy, 2 children.
This woman was just recently engaged.
Yeah. And the reality is they can go through every hurdle they're supposed to go through and present the best possible case of why this attempted rescue should be made.
Yeah.
And still they're at the whims of some IDF lieutenant, which is what happened in the case of this particular incident, who doesn't give a shit and doesn't care about preserving the life of civilians living in Gaza.
Ben Hania didn't need to make Omar this irate in order to get the point across for me, and it also feels just a little bit weird. It's your buddy could easily be on that martyr wall. You've already talked to your friend.
It does feel like a proxy for the audience in a way that doesn't it doesn't, I don't want to say it feels disingenuous, but it doesn't entirely work.
Yeah. So there's a point later on where Mahdi more completely describes the channels that they go, and he draws it like an infinity sign, which I thought was actually
I liked this section. I thought this was really good.
Yeah. So then Mahdi is sort of left to be the exposition, a little bit of like, here's why we don't just rush into these war zones. Hind is over here. We have to talk to, I think it's Red Cross first. And then maybe if not Red Cross, maybe we go to the Gaza Health Authority or the
Ministry of Health.
Ministry of Health.
Yeah.
And then I think there was another intermediary. And then there's the Israeli Defense Forces. And then even if the Israeli Defense Forces say, there's two things they're trying to do. They're trying to get permission from the IDF to go in, but they're also trying to find a safe route through the rubble and stuff that is also sort of up to the IDF to tell them which way to go. So you basically have to go back through the process and wait for the green light. So as he's describing this and drawing this diagram, then the camera sort of shows a shot from the other side of the wall, and he's drawn an infinity sign.
وانا ملزم اني اتبع الاجراءات كامله وبحسب التعليمات لانه اذا بنغلط اي غلطه او بنتخطى اي خطوه بالغلط ممكن يقصوا امبالانساتنا.
Basically, like, this is the endless permutations we have to go through to even save a single child, and who knows how long it's going to take. It could take forever. And I thought that was
I loved it. I thought it was great, and it's where Omar's function as depicted in the movie, I think was well executed, because he's asking that kind of question that allows, even if the real life Omar was very
well versed.
Yeah, totally. It allows Mahdi to go, I want to show the audience the tension of this kind of dialectic between total fucking absurdity and the pathos of what's happening to this little girl. If you don't come away from watching something like The Voice of Hind Rajab and at least reckoning with the storytelling of what actually happened, even if you don't watch this movie and you aren't expressly and completely for the rest of your life anti-war, then I just can't relate to you. It's at this section that I kind of described as feeling like something out of Finnegan's Wake or Waiting for Godot. It's got this absurd element of the bureaucracy, totally absurd bureaucratic functions when there's a 6-year-old girl whose entire family's been murdered, and she's in this car, and they have to ask permission from all these different entities. And then ultimately, the entity that's committing these barbaric acts, they have to ask them for permission. Right. The middle section of the movie, I will just say, is totally agonizing. We know the stakes. We know the circumstances of this little girl. She's trapped in a car with these 6 bloody bodies of her family. There's no food or water in the car. Hind confirms that it was a tank that fired at the car and that it's still near her. She can see it outside the vehicle that she's trapped in. The calls with Hind end up dropping and reconnecting repeatedly. She ends up sharing personal details about her school life with the dispatchers. This is one of the most challenging bits to sit through.
Yeah, you've got it in the notes.
Really difficult. She tells Omar when he asks the name of her school is called A Happy Childhood. She asks when help is coming. The dispatchers reassure her repeatedly. And that's their only function at this point. And this is when Ray, my wife, who I watched this movie with on Valentine's Day, said that this is, to her, a meditation on love. When I was even saying to her afterwards, I was like, well, happy Valentine's Day, babe. Yeah. And she's like, well, that movie was a meditation on love. And she was describing how the last 3 hours on Earth for this little girl were these dispatchers trying to save her. Yeah. But also trying to communicate with her, to hold her in love through their speech, through speaking into this phone call, and asking her things about her, and trying to help her feel like a little girl for the last few hours. I got to be careful talking about this. She asks when help is coming. The dispatchers reassure her repeatedly. Her fear kind of fluctuates between a kind of calm obedience and a childlike panic, as it should. Outside the car she's in, you can hear the sounds of gunfire and tanks. I feel like the approach from Kaouther Ben Hania as the director is to just basically allow the actors the room to occupy the same emotional space. I described it as a kind of contiguousness between the real life person they're portraying and then occupying their own role, but also bringing their own personal backgrounds.
كنت عم تحكي لي إنه الدنيا هلأ ليلت صح؟ بس لسه في فضا، لسه معنا وقت.
While listening, I would imagine from a technique perspective, I haven't confirmed any of this, but that they were probably sitting there literally on set listening to the voice of Hind Rajab.
Yeah.
It is pure anguish. It's unthinkable heartbreak. Rana begins to pray with Hind. The dispatchers they finally are given photographs of her, to the point you were earlier talking about with the wall. Omar continues to tell Mahdi of how long they've been on the phone.
Just to like dig in a little bit on the love thing that Ray mentioned, she starts calling them uncle and aunt, which I think is like a cultural thing, but that is like clearly like, for right now, we are family, right? Like we are here. I'm your auntie. And there's different times where they're trying to explain to this little girl what's happening. One of which is like, why isn't the ambulance coming yet? And they're like, explain it to her like it's a family. We're like, well, Mahdi is our dad, and he's trying to talk to the army dad to like get the army to let us come in, like let your aunts and uncles come in and help you. And the aunts and uncles are, of course, the ambulance, rescuers.
Oh, I love that you're saying this, because I think that their dynamic and the way that these Red Crescent volunteers interact with each other is very much like a family. They all want the same things.
Yeah.
They're going to fight each other at times. They're going to yell at each other. They might even hit each other but they're all pulling in the same direction. So it has the dynamics of a family, the way that they operate through this entire crisis.
And you get a sense that these Red Crescent workers are also being like, well, in the sense that like extended family can be, or extended community can be family. Like we are the stand-ins for these, tight-knit family units now that a big chunk of this family has been killed.
So at this point, Mahdi's hands completely tied by layers upon layers of bureaucracy. He's got the Red Crescent, Red Cross, red tape. Lording over all of it is the Israeli military. Hind says that she's hurt and that she's bleeding. And Omar describes that to Mahdi, and Mahdi says, oh, you should post that. You should publish that. Mahdi tells Omar to post this to social media, that she's hurt and she's bleeding, and Omar immediately, and I thought this is one of the most brilliant parts of the movie, the way it was performed, the idea behind it. Maybe it happened in real life, doesn't really matter, but Omar mocks Mahdi immediately and says, great idea. And I'll be sure to post it in English. And then he shows Mahdi his phone, and he's scrolling through all these. We've all seen him. Anybody, especially on Twitter.
Photos of dead bodies. Yeah.
Especially on Twitter, but also TikTok before the Ellisons bought TikTok. And he says he's going through horrifying images from Gaza and just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And he says, children's bodies ripped apart on the side of the road. Do you really think the voice of a terrified girl will spark their empathy? She needs an ambulance. He follows and screams, the rescue team.
Yeah.
Omar, Mahdi, Rana, Nisreen, they go back and forth for like 20 minutes. This is back to this idea of very much like a family dynamic.
This is like a third of the film, basically.
Totally. They're arguing, they're yelling. Then they go to consoling each other. They go through every stage of grief with one another. They think that they've lost contact with Hind because at this point she stops talking. Mahdi is then worried because, back to the earlier point, he's putting together this package of information to get this green light to attempt the rescue. And he speculates this means that they won't get the green light for the ambulance rescue if she stops talking.
Well, but also though, right before he says that, Mahdi tells whoever he's talking to on the other line, she's stopped talking. That was the one moment where it was like, oh, I don't even know if like Mahdi might be so traumatized. Maybe he doesn't want to even send the ambulances out anymore. Like,
I feel like he was just consistent about, I think he was already so cynical about the likelihood that the ambulance wouldn't actually get to its destination and to actually save Hind's life.
Right.
I think he was like, I just don't want to lose more friends. I don't want to lose more humanitarian workers. Nisreen steps in, who is the counselor. I think you described accurately.
Yeah, I think she's like a grief counselor.
For the group. For the workers, yeah. She begins to speak into the phone and more or less go through like a guided meditation, and it cuts between the real life recording of Nisreen and the actor that's portraying her.
Yeah.
And she says, close your eyes, remember the sea, the sun shining on the sea. And it has this moment also where the other dispatch the other dispatchers, the other volunteers, including Rana, are sitting and they're being guided through this meditation as well. And it's affecting them. Rana actually looks at peace for just a second and her eyes start to close.
شهيق وزفير عميق كتير كتير زي ما علمتك بناخد نفس شمينا الوردة وبعدين نفخنا على الشمعة.
It's interesting as you're sort of describing this part. I don't think I would have like sat on this, but it almost feels like, and this is going to be hard to say, and maybe this is part of what Omar can't wrap his head around, and maybe Mahdi can't wrap his head around is, man, like at that point where you've gathered all the information, it's really unclear if this, infinity loop is ever going to be resolved in a positive way.
Yeah. I think I know what you're going to say.
It's almost like these aid workers are doing palliative care.
Dude, I know.
It's almost like hospice.
Last experience on Earth for Hind was talking to these dispatchers, Rana, Omar, and Nisreen. She says, close your eyes, remember the sea, the sun shining on the sea, how you played in the water and sand. Eventually, Hind calls out and starts speaking again. Nisreen introduces herself because Hind's confused. I think she thinks that she might be Rana.
Yeah. Hind
pleads, and she's crying and says, save me.
Yeah.
We go back to Mahdi, and Mahdi says, I still don't have a green light.
So this is one of those moments where it's like, this felt almost like a stage play.
Yeah, it did.
Omar gets really upset.
And not in a good way.
Point. And he ends up hucking his phone and we don't see where the phone hits. It just like lands off screen.
Yeah.
And then all the lights in the building go out.
Yeah.
Like he had hit the breaker box or something. It was really strange.
Oh, I forgot about this. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like then for that next section of the film, they're in darkness. And that's why it feels like a little theatrical in the sense of like, it's a physical change to the set that's meant to sort of like represent the darkness that's descending on their souls, maybe, or something like that. But it just felt like for something that's so sort of has been very realistic to this point, doing something like that just felt a little off.
Well, and the very, very, very least realistic part of the movie then happens, which I bumped on both times watching this. And I just gotta be honest. They go to different sections of the building. This is a moment. I don't know how you describe it. It's just like a lull.
They're playing war games on their
phones. Lull in activity in the storytelling. Mahdi ends up in the bathroom. I think Omar's in a different room.
Yeah.
And then they start playing a video game together over a network, apparently, on their phones. And it sounds like
Fortnite.
Fortnite or Call of Duty or something. It really hit me as this did not need to be in the movie. It's like their way of breaking bread and being like, hey, everything's okay. Let's go get some headshots on fucking Call of Duty. And so inauthentic that you hear like these weird audio cues of excellent. Yeah. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Yeah.
It's another reason that was just like jarring. Like, what is the actual relationship between Omar and Mahdi? Because it seems like Omar's brand new, and then like this moment, it's like this is a game they've played together countless times.
Totally.
Right.
There's a dozen different ways you could have shown them sort of capitulating and breaking bread and reconnecting. And I think that would have been at the bottom of my list. Yeah. This shit didn't work, but whatever.
So then they finally do get the green light. So the two drivers of the ambulance, or the two workers in the ambulance, are dispatched. And again, it is about an 8-minute drive. And you see on the screen, there's basically like a Google Maps stand-in where they've got the chart, the course charted. Mm-hmm. You can see the little thing. It looks a little bit like Uber Eats.
Yep.
They're finally sent. And that's when all of a sudden there's some hope. You see some hope on Omar's face.
I fell for it.
Sort of detected some hope on Mahdi's face, which is not, like that's where you get a little bit of like, I think Mahdi was the hardest character for me to relate to personally because of that, because I think they could have done a better job of helping us understand why he was so traumatized by all of the people he's basically led to death, right, through this process. And then you're picturing, we've seen pictures of Gaza, it's like, can we even tell what are streets anymore because of all the rubble? Mm-hmm. So they're having to do this delicate navigational balance, but they get there. And then the dispatchers do ask him to confirm that she sees the ambulance, and she doesn't. The last words from the EMTs in the ambulance, there she is. And then we hear the sound of gunfire on the call. They ask Hind if she's heard the gunfire. She says yes. There's no further response from the ambulance.
And this is where I personally bottomed out. Like Rana earlier when she faints, I was near that point as a viewer of this story, because I don't think, if I can remember my sort of emotional space watching it the first time,
Right.
mostly I feel like I felt a lot of anger more than just sadness.
Yeah.
About the fact that this is happening, about our taxpayer money, all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
I start feeling angry at Americans for voting for this stuff to happen.
Yeah.
It's the two different times in the movie where there's an audio cue that just completely flattened me. And this was the second. The first was Lyon, when the tank fire happens and the call drops early on in the movie. And this time when you kind of know we've been through this, that just meant that the two EMTs were likely killed.
Yeah. We think that the ambulance has been destroyed, but Omar's still on the phone, or the whole crew is on the phone with Hind now. And Omar repeats, "Did you hear the gunfire earlier?" Hind says yes. Nazreen asks Hind if she sees anybody trying to rescue her. Hind says no. The last line we hear on the call is from Hind's mom, who has been, so she's actually been patched in with like just two different cell phones, I think. Like, with the speakers sort of put close to each other.
That's correct, right?
I think so.
I've seen this twice, and I think it was actually Hind's mom.
You see somebody calling somebody else, and that one is actually Hind's mom. So I think at that point, they're like, we need to try to get this mom, like, to basically
it makes
words to their daughter.
It makes me think that they must have been attempting in the hours leading up to this moment in real life
to connect with the mom.
To connect with Hind's mother.
Yeah.
And that they finally were successful, and she got a chance to talk to Hind.
Yeah. And she says, "I'll be waiting for you, sweetie, my love, my darling, mommy's love."
The movie then fades to black. And after that last expression from Hind's mom, this is where the dramatization in the movie ends. It fades back in, and we see Hind's real life mother and her little brother, and they're being interviewed about what happened. It's just conventional interview setup.
Yeah, it looks like a documentary.
It does. It becomes a purely nonfiction film at this point.
Yep.
And we learn that it took 12 days once the IDF withdrew from this invasion of Gaza to discover what happened to Hind and the EMTs who attempted to rescue her. It ends with some real life video of the aftermath of Israel's attack on Gaza, including the fact that an investigation was done that showed 335 bullets had hit the car of the Hamida family.
Yeah.
And so this is her family, her extended family, with Hind Rajab inside with her 6 family members. The body of Hind Rajab was recovered and found inside the car with her relatives. The entire family, 7 people, including Hind Rajab. They were in a car. It was a Kia Picanto, which is a compact 4-door hatchback.
Oh.
Similar to the car I drive. I drive a Honda Fit 4-door hatchback. It's tiny.
Yeah.
The idea of putting 7 people in it, I don't know how I would even attempt that. And so it suggests to me again that
they're just piling as many people as they can in.
They were scrambling to get out of Gaza City.
It looks like the front. So the actual archival, the documentary footage of the recovery workers, not rescue workers at this point, because we're 12 days later and everybody's dead. Looking at the scene, it almost looks like a bigger car. I thought it was a minivan at first.
Yeah, I did too. The whole
front is crushed.
Yeah.
So like there might, like maybe the tank rolled over this thing. We don't know. Or it got hit by some sort of explosive ordnance, because the ambulance is absolutely nuked. It's all twisted metal. It exploded clearly.
It's
like,
obliterated.
It's obliterated.
Yeah. Inconclusive evidence suggested that it was destroyed by anti-tank ordnance.
Yeah, that would
fired
make sense.
from a tank. The EMTs who died were named Ahmed and Yusuf. Israel claimed that there were not any troops present in the neighborhood and denied carrying out the attack. However, this was refuted by the Washington Post and Sky News. Satellite imagery and visual evidence showed that a number of Israeli tanks were indeed present, and one had likely fired 335 rounds on the car that Rajab and her family had been in, with tank operators being able to see that the car had civilians, including children, in it. The forensic architecture investigation concluded that an Israeli tank had also likely attacked the ambulance that came for Hind Rajab. I don't know about you, Luke. The end of the movie completely knocked the wind out of me. I keep expressing gratitude on our podcast for these filmmakers like Ari Aster, Park Chan-wook, our most recent episode about No Other Choice, for making these incredibly punishing movies about difficult subjects. Does it change things? And back to your trying to define art if nobody watches? Because as much as I think this was made for and kind of cultivated for a Western audience, I think I agree with that assertion.
Yeah.
What does it mean if people don't watch it?
Yeah. We don't have a monoculture anymore, right? So like nobody was going to respond to this movie the way that people responded to, say, like Schindler's List or something like that, right? Because like there just aren't that many. It's not as big of a movie as that.
It's not in English language either, like Schindler's List.
But then if you can't also then think about this in the vacuum. If we don't have a monoculture, then you can't judge the efficacy of a piece of, and this is not a polemical film. Like the tone is not polemical, but it has a rhetorical.
Sure. It's
like, we should stop this violence. And like, is that going to work in the age of TikTok? Well, maybe it'll work for some people. Maybe it'll work for, people of a certain age who are still seeing foreign films in America, right?
Well, until doing this podcast, if I'm being completely honest, I don't think I would have seen this movie. Yeah. Certainly wouldn't have seen it in the movie theater. Watching this in the movie theater meant I couldn't press pause. I couldn't look away. I couldn't scroll past it. I liked this quote from Greek filmmaker Yorgos Lanthimos. Said, "This essential film encapsulates the horrific state of the world today, but at the same time manages to reveal that if there's any hope, it lies in the humanity of those that are deprived of theirs."
I'll just say, like, old Hollywood, right? Like people who do remember when film was a monoculture, and like, people whose careers were built on everybody's talking about going to the movies, saying like, well, what can we do as actors, as filmmakers? I guess we have to help make a film about it. You know what I mean? And I think that's actually, I don't know how successful this is going to be or how many people's minds it's going to change. But like, when you feel helpless, doing what you know how to do feels like a pretty good way to, rather than just wallowing in the helplessness, I don't know.
If nothing else, what Kaouther Ben Hania has succeeded in doing is creating a trace, creating a record, taking those 70 minutes of recorded audio recordings of Hind Rajab, and creating a document, an artistic document out of it that means she's no longer going to be memory hold. So speaking of the director, Kaouther Ben Hania, she recently was the recipient of an award in Berlin at what's called the Cinema for Peace Gala. Mm-hmm. This happened right down the road from the Berlin International Film Festival, which we'll have notes on as well. And she refused the award and had this to say. This is just a crib of the full thing that she said. "Tonight in Berlin, there are people who gave political cover to that genocide by reframing the mass civilian killing as self-defense or as complex circumstances, by denigrating those who protest. But as you may know, peace is not a perfume sprayed over violence so power can feel refined can feel comfortable. And cinema is not just image laundering. If we can speak about peace, we must also speak about justice." In attendance at this event, though, in our upside down fucking world, Hillary Clinton and Kevin Spacey. Down the road at the Berlin International Film Festival, Neil Patrick Harris and Wim Wenders, Wim Wenders being one of the organizers of the Berlin International
German filmmaker
Film Festival, Berlinale, were among others who declined to say anything about Gaza. Neil Patrick Harris went and made a complete dumbass of himself. He made a bunch of comments, including saying, "I just want to make apolitical art." And I ask myself, or you, Luke, where is the hope? I have to ask myself this because I want to be able to talk to my young daughters about the world and about our country and our collective, including mine, complicitness in what's happening. And I always come back to this, and I think this feels a little generic, but I'll just say it here. Until we're in a position as a country to overthrow Citizens United as a starting point, until there's a political party that represents real actionable opposition to MAGA, I don't have a lot of hope. I really don't. I sometimes feel like Monsu, the character in No Other Choice at the end, where he just
surrounded by robots,
and he finds his little bits of ephemeral joy on planet Earth. But it's on a day like today where Israel and the United States combined to attack Iran. I don't feel particularly hopeful, being honest, especially when Democrats are, many of them, on board with what's happening.
To this day.
To this day. Yeah.
I think
I wish I had anything hopeful to say. Like, it's very tough.
Something that could be sort of a parallel moment. And this is why I kind of want to spend a lot of time in the future, and not just on this podcast, thinking about what is the point of art and what is the point of like mass appeal art in an increasingly fragmented world. Like maybe like it's going to take different things to, like Dr. Strangelove isn't going to turn all of America. Like the way that Dr. Strangelove was something that entered the social consciousness against warmongering in the 60s and nuclear proliferation and stuff. That's just not going to happen. Maybe we just need to see this from a million different angles because of our fragmentary media environment and because we're all fragmented, polarized people. We don't gather in community with each other. We've lost the ability to sort of humanize difference in a way that's important. Like there's a lot of talk in civic spaces and really this is a lot of coming from like leftist organizing is like, just go meet your neighbor that has the MAGA sign out front just to humanize you and humanize that person.
Yeah. I am not helping myself or anybody by being too cynical. So I will say that if we are ever going to course correct, it happens slowly.
Yeah.
One step at a time. Nobody wants this war in Iran.
Mm-hmm.
No Americans want this war in Gaza.
Yep.
Nobody wants to be funding the wars that are never ending in the Middle East and are led by Israel. It's what I want to do and why I feel committed to doing this podcast is just to respond to movies, respond to art with you, my friend, to have conversations like this one, and to be thankful and grateful to filmmakers like Kaouther Ben Hania or Park Chan-wook or Ari Aster or Amy Berg. I love talking about movies, and I'm so glad we get to do it on this podcast together.
And it's not going to be the hammer swing of progress, like the old Apple commercial from 1984.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
right.
Like, the world's not going to change in a single piece of media or in a single political decision
Or one election cycle.
If the Democrats grow a spine, they're probably going to win in the midterm. Is that going to mean anything? Things that feel hegemonic, things that feel impossible to just, break apart can also crumble quickly. Political power shifts faster than it ever has, at least in my opinion.
And anytime there's a movie like The Voice of Hind Rajab that comes out, go to the cinema and experience these works of art that are challenging, that are provocative, that have something to say. You might not entirely agree with what they have to say, but at least experience them. And so I look forward to continuing to do that with this podcast.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap up this episode of All Those Moments in our conversation about The Voice of Hind Rajab. I cannot more strongly recommend everybody watch this movie,
Yeah, I think so.
Especially Americans. We're going to take a break from really difficult media, and we're going to do an Oscars watch party on March 15th. For people who are local, they can come hang out with us and do that. But our next movie is going to be Peaky Blinders, which is coming out on Netflix soon.
I mean, I don't know. I'm a little upset that you're saying that the Life and Times of Tommy Corley are not going to be a tough watch, but because that man lived through some stuff.
Oh, that is true. Yeah. And it is based on some real stuff. But I think it'll be positively breezy compared to No Other Choice and certainly The Voice of Hind Rajab.
Yeah.
I am not going to watch all 6 seasons. I stopped after season 2
of
Peaky Blinders. So I'm just going to go watch all the YouTube recaps of seasons 3 through 6 so that I go in knowing what's happening.
That'll be interesting to talk about. Like, what's the point of a capstone movie, like All Saints or the Saints of Newark and stuff that came out after Sopranos. But then also, you haven't seen the whole series. I think I might be able to close the gap. I think I might have missed the last season, but maybe I could go watch the whole thing and that could just be the difference.
I watched the trailer for Peaky Blinders, the movie, and I'll be honest with you, I do not think I'm going to end up liking this movie. So whatever, maybe it'll be like House of Dynamite. Hey, Netflix, sometimes you make House of Dynamite, sometimes you make Train Dreams. This might not be one that lands for me, and I look forward to chatting about it. Please follow the show on YouTube or Spotify. They both have video now. You could also get lots of updates, clips from the podcast, or send us a DM on our Instagram page. That's going to do it for this episode of All Those Moments. Thank you to the Magic Lantern. Thank you for listening or watching. And thank you, Luke.
Thanks, Benji.